Did you know that Plainville lost two schools to fire in the span of just 2 years, just 50 yards apart from one another? Did you know that Plainville Town Hall and Plainville Elementary were once in the same building? What about the fact that Plainville's oldest school is now a private home and looks nothing like the one-room schoolhouse of yesteryear? Well, if you've always wanted to know about the history of Plainville schools, and it's kind of a confusing one, sit in your seats and get your pencils and notebooks ready and get ready to go back to school. This is the Plainville Historical Commission's History of Plainville Schools. Let's just start by saying that Plainville is the epitome of the state of Massachusetts when it comes to education. Massachusetts has the oldest public schools in the country, and the idea of public education literally started in Massachusetts. And to this day, we lead the nation with wicked smarts. Yeah, go ahead and laugh. I made a Bostonian joke there. Not to brag. Okay, maybe a little. But some pretty smart people can trace their educational roots through Plainville schools. Ask anyone who was lucky enough to attend Plainville schools and be guided through their early education by its amazing teachers, and the reply will typically be the same. They were not only lucky for their education, but for the most part wouldn't change a thing, except for maybe the fact that we all have to leave the Plainville school systems, for most of us starting in 7th grade, the start of growing up. What makes Plainville schools different from other schools in the area is the sheer number of schools that this town has not only gone through, but utilized in its short history, with most of them roughly in the same area, on the corner of South Street and, fittingly, School Street. Franklin may currently beat us with the number of schools in their large district, but I'm pretty sure we would win overall by the number of schools in our history books, especially given the fact that we're not that old of a town. Remember, we're the youngest town in Norfolk County and one of the youngest in the state of Massachusetts, and we're not that big in size overall. The oldest school, as far as we know, was the Blake School. Unfortunately, we do not have an exact year it was built, nor do we have any photos of it as a school or any classes that attended school there. We have documents of it as a school, and we have reports to back it up. This photo, taken in 1949, is the earliest photo we have found of the Blake School, long after it ceased to be a school and had become a private home. The Blake School was located on South Street, in other words 1A, on the Wrentham side of town, just close to the Wrentham border, so right around this area. On the other side of town, literally, sits the Bliss Chapel. Now, if any building in Plainville looks like an old one-room schoolhouse, it's this building. Known originally as the Shepherdsville School, it was built in about 1871 and served the section of town known as Shepherdsville, near what is now 152. This is unfortunately the only photo we have of the Shepherdsville School before it became the Bliss Chapel in the early 1900s. We believe around 1907. But clearly, it hasn't changed much. It still looks like an old one-room schoolhouse. So that covers the area of 152 and the Wrentham side of 1A, but what about the center of town? Well, come in for recess. It's time for a little geography lesson. This is where Plainville schools really start getting confusing, and they're all in the same area of town. The Grand Army of the Republic originally had their building on South Street, where the entrance to Telford Park now sits. And if Google Earth plays nice, which I hope it does, take my little guy here, plunk him down, right about here. Let's see. Perfect. So right in this area, where the entrance to Telford Park now sits. Now, for a brief history of the GAR, just in case anyone is unfamiliar with the term, it was a fraternal organization made up of veterans of the Union Army. For some reason, we're not quite sure why, in 1881, GAR moved their building from this side of South Street to this side, right about where Cumberland Farms now sits, so on the corner of South Street and School Street. The second floor of the GAR was their main meeting space. The main floor was turned into an elementary school for local students to attend, rented out by the town of Rentham. Remember, we're not Plainville yet. We're still Slacksville at this point. We're still part of Rentham. This is unfortunately the only photo we have of the GAR as a school, and this is the only known class photo. No other photos have emerged of a class that attended school there. The lowest level of the building was also rented out. And keep this in mind, it's really important. It's going to come back to play in just a few seconds. This area was rented out by a local bakery. On the night of December 26, 1905, the donut vat in the bakery caused a small explosion, which caused the entire GAR building to go up in smoke, resulting in number 2 of Plainville schools being lost to fire. Yes, you heard that last part right. I said number 2. Remember, I did warn you this was going to be interesting and a little confusing. The year before the GAR building burned, just across the street, in other words, on School Street, sat a large, imposing building. That really looked more like the Addams Family mansion than a school. This was Plainville High School. Records show that it was built roughly around the same time as the GAR opened as a school, so about 1881. But recent years have given the old building the nickname of the Addams Family House, thanks to its Gothic architecture and style. It's a really cool building, and I would have loved to have the chance to see it in person. Plainville may have become its own town in 1905, but for some reason, 1905 and 1904 were not good years to be schools, especially in Plainville. In 1904, the Plainville High School burned under mysterious circumstances. All that remain of the school is the bell that currently sits in front of Plainville Police and Fire, and the weather vane that sits atop the Senior Center. Both were placed on the 1905 high school that replaced the old Plainville High School and removed when that school was raised in 1958. Both were placed in their respective locations later on. This goes to show you that the past is always with us. We just have to look for it. Okay, we're about to run out of time here, so let's pause and move on to part 2 of schools after 1905 in just a minute. Besides, the bell just rang. It's lunchtime already. Phew, apologies. Hope everyone had a great lunch and are ready for the afternoon edition. There's still a lot more to get through, so if you've finished with your lunch, clean up your trays, push in your chairs, and line up. So, School Street is aptly named in Plainville. 4 of the total 10 schools in town call the block of South Street and School Street home. This block includes what is now Cumberland Farms, Foxborough Savings Bank, Plainville Post Office, and the Plainville Senior Center. After the 2 fires and after Bliss Chapel closed as a school to become a church, 2 new schools were built not far from each other. A new Plainville High School and a new Plainville Elementary School / town offices. In 1921, another fire nearly destroyed another Plainville school. Sort of. Only this time it was the town hall side, but I seriously count it. It was another fire at another Plainville school. It caused only minor damage, however, thankfully. In 1925, a new addition was added to Plainville High School, and from then until the 1950s, not much changed in the way of Plainville schools. Sports continued to grow in town, with basketball, baseball, and even football. Class photos are in abundance, even though we really don't have much information on the specific students, or in some cases the teachers. But it's a great glimpse into Plainville's educational past, and these photos are awesome. On February 20th, 1950, on South Street, just up the street from the herd of schools, land was donated to the town of Plainville by Leon and Ellen Smith. With this new property, construction began on the new Plainville Elementary School. Meanwhile, in the area of School Street and George Street, a private school known as the Dominican Academy opened its doors in September of 1951. However, 25 years later, it would close as a school, but the building is still there, serving a different function now. Did we not warn you in the beginning on how many schools this town has had? Anyways, the new Plainville Elementary would open its doors the same year as the Dominican Academy, and in the beginning handled students of varying grades throughout the years. 8th grade and under, but for the most part, the older grades still attended Plainville High School. However, things were beginning to brew between the three towns of Plainville, Wrentham, and Norfolk, and on March 28, 1956, that plan was put into action, as construction began on King Philip Middle School in Norfolk and King Philip High School in Wrentham. By June of 1957, the last class to graduate from Plainville High School had received their diplomas. In 1958, the carpentry and mechanic shops were in operation in KP, and on November 18, 1963, the King Philip Regional School District was officially formed. That same year, the Plainville Athletic League, PAL for short, leased land on George Street for 99 years for a grand total of, drumroll please, $1. Yes, $1 was all it took to lease the fields that would later become known as PAL. With the end of Plainville High School and a brand new elementary school down the street, and new middle and high schools curing Wrentham and Plainville and Norfolk together, the need for the old Plainville Elementary School had declined. It was no longer being used as town offices, as those had moved in the late 40s to the current town hall and were shared with the fire station into the 1970s. The building was outdated and in need of repairs. In 1964, a new elementary school was approved, and it was to be located on Messenger Street, on the other side of town, on 106, headed towards Foxborough. In 1965, the Anna Ware Jackson School opened, named for Plainville teacher Anna Ware, who had spent 44 of her 53 years as a teacher in Plainville. In 1970, the Plainville Elementary School was renamed the Beatrice H. Wood School after beloved and dedicated teacher and principal of Plainville Schools, who had begun teaching in the original school in 1930 and had retired in 1973. The Wood School would serve grades 3 through 6, as well as school functions, Halloween parades, father-daughter dances, mother-son dances, concerts, plays, town meetings, fun fairs, and other events, and even a visit from Patriots quarterback Drew Bledsoe. Sadly, the Wood School closed its doors in 2004. In order to keep the schools closer together, basically coming full circle with the schools all being in the same area, the new B.H. Wood School was built next to the Jackson School on Messenger Street. The old Wood School was getting too old and was unable to handle the large volume of students coming through its doors. From 2004 until 2017, the Old Wood School would steadily decline. It would continue to service the area, but in a different function than it ever had. Storage for the highway department, yard sales for local Boy Scout troops, a cat shelter would be attached to a trailer outside of the building where the cafeteria once was, and most well known in this area, it was used as a training ground for local and national law enforcement and military. The school was shot up, barricaded, bombed, and most famously attacked one night by a Black Hawk helicopter. On October 23, 2017, the building known as Plainville Elementary was officially demolished. The residents of Plainville are awaiting anxiously as the new town hall and new public safety building will be completed on the grounds of the Old Wood School, where thousands of Plainville kids had passed through its doors, and the school has become a memory, kept alive by stories, photos, and remembrances of time spent there. Phew! Confused about the history of Plainville schools yet? I did warn you it was a lot of information, and we didn't even cover the herds of preschools in the area, including my own alma mater, Preschool Adventures, which sat next to Bliss Chapel and has since become an insurance agency, I think. If you're interested in seeing what the Old Wood School looked like in its final years, especially as an urban exploration of abandoned elementary schools, be sure to check out our 2 walkthrough videos. We did one in June of 2016 and then had a chance to do it again in 2017, that time with a former teacher of the school. I grew up in that school and I had no idea that it had a locker room in the basement. Who knew? That walkthrough also gave us, as the Historical Commission, a chance to secure artifacts from the school to help tell its story, such as a school desk, a clock, the intercom system, signs, and items like that will all be on display starting at the Historical Commission at the Humphrey House, and then later hopefully on display at the new town hall for all of Plainville to see. Well, our bus is about to be called. Better get packed up and ready to go. If you're interested in more videos about the history of Plainville, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Let us know in the comments below what you thought about this video and future videos you'd like to see. Till next time, this is the Plainville Historical Commission signing off.